What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me on D's analysis. We're going to be looking at MSTR, Bitcoin, a couple of charts and indicators. We really haven't moved too much compared to yesterday. We're kind of in the same position, sitting right on the same zones that we've already been drawing out, which are the fibs here. To the downside, we're sitting right above the 0.5. If we fall underneath this level, this could indicate some downside, potentially retesting this downward sloping trend line and then potentially falling back inside of it, or we could get a bounce. Ideally, we just want to get a bounce right off of the zone that we're at currently. That upward sloping trend line on the daily, you can see we haven't hit it, but on the weekly we have. So maybe all we need is that weekly retest, or maybe we trend sideways into it and then we end up going up. We do have a big day coming up tomorrow. We have earnings for MSTR, should be after hours, so we'll see how that plays out with the new rule in effect. We'll see if it plays any kind of role and gets the stock moving with some volatility, hopefully volatility to the upside, especially after getting our touch of this upward sloping trend line and bottom of the channel. Hopefully some upside would catapult this thing higher and this turns into a wick and we get a nice move to the upside. Hopefully it's not dull and kind of just sideways. We'll see, of course. As you can see here, last time we had earnings, the next week and a half were pretty solid. And then we found some resistance. So maybe we can start to push up a little bit higher after the fact. And the other time we got earnings, it was a good 2 weeks. So they have been pretty decent the last two occurrences. This one was in the middle of a downturn. So, of course, overall the move was bearish. But for the 2 weeks that, earnings, was present, it did pretty decent. And like I said, these two were okay. So we'll see if we can get a wick here and then maybe a good week and get us rolling back above this key level of support on this golden zone and hopefully start to fight with this key level of resistance here at 445 to around 435. I do think we need to break back above this level, retest for a move higher if we really want to make it to the midline of this channel, which is where I think we could find some level of resistance. Like I've said previously, I think if we do make our way there, we could get a little rejection off of that area, as we have seen it prior. Let me draw that a little bit better. There we go. You can see that it was acting as support and resistance along the way. So I would imagine as we run into it, it will act as resistance, at least initially. And then if we can break it, it'll act as support. Break and hold, not just break it. We have to break and hold it. So we have a pretty decent size move to the downside. It's been pretty bearish since July 17th. It's just been absolutely bleeding out. This was looking incredibly bullish as we were bouncing off of this key level of support, and then we just absolutely fell straight off and fell off a cliff as Bitcoin has kind of just trended sideways for the most part. And in terms of the fib, we're practically in the same spot on this leg here. We're sitting underneath the 0.5 to the 618. So we did talk about this yesterday, where we said now that we closed on the daily underneath our fib, the 0.5 to the 618, that we could potentially retest. And if we do retest and hold underneath, it could open up the idea of us going lower, which would coincide with this downward sloping trend line, or to this upward sloping trend line. We'll see. But we do have support underneath price, so that is a good thing. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, this is opening up the idea of a continuation, potentially to the 786. That's the second to the last line in the sand. Then the last line in the sand is the 886, and then the move is practically over. And then it completely flips bearish. And now we're talking about the larger golden zone once again at that point, because now you're back underneath the golden zone and trending to the downside. On the daily SMAs, we closed and retested off the 50, which is another thing that we talked about. After getting a close, we're saying that we could retest and if we hold this, now it's going to open up the idea of us pushing down further. I don't think we're going to make it to the 200. I could see us going a little bit lower, maybe to the downward sloping trend line potentially. We'll see, of course, with earnings. Hopefully earnings flips this thing completely around and this price action is completely irrelevant with the SMAs and we can start trending higher. But if the momentum continues, then I could see us going at least to the upward sloping trend line. Here on Bitcoin, you can see we're still creating our bull pennant. We're still holding it pretty well. Probably adjust it a little bit to make that make more sense. We get more touches on this move here. Maybe it's something like that instead. So we have the most touches there. It looks like we get more touches, which is what's important. We have more touches there. Let me adjust this one. It looks like our bull pennant's still playing out. Like I said previously, it does take us to around that 127 mark, depending on where you draw it from. But if we take it all the way up to the top, then it takes you a little bit higher to around 132. If you measure it from this bottom to be a little more conservative, then it could take you to around 137 for your price target, which would line up with the midline of the entire channel, which we would more than likely find some kind of resistance. But overall, we are just consolidating right after hitting this upward sloping trend line that we were talking about when we were over here. We were saying this trend line would play a key role in our price action once we reach it, and that's exactly what happened. Even after getting a close, we're still fighting with it. We closed above it and we're still fighting, trending sideways and struggling to get past it. So we got one close above it, two closes above it, and now we're still trending sideways and creating that bull pennant. Hopefully it starts to play out. And on a larger time frame, we still have this move here. And if we measure that out, that takes us to 143. And then if we measure out this bull flag, this one will also take us to 143 if I remember correctly. You measure that one out, it takes you to 143 around there, 146. And if we measure out this bull flag, so this one here, and you measure that one out, still takes you to around, it's a little bit higher, but to 153, 154. So anywhere from 142 to 150 is kind of the price target that we're looking at, somewhere in this area, before we potentially find another level of resistance. Of course, there's different ways of looking at potential levels of resistance. We can pull a fib from here and we can flip the fib, and you can look at the 1618 and the 1272. You can see at the 1272 right here at this level, we already found resistance. That's where our wick happened, at that 123 level for Bitcoin. You can see the 1272 rejected price. And then if we were to start to make our move higher and we get that move here for this bull flag, along this way, we could potentially rally up. And as we're pushing up, we find rejection and kind of create another little flag before making our way to that target that we have set out. So we could probably stumble a little bit once we make it to the 1618, which lines up with this midline of the entire channel, before continuing to that price target that we have set out. And when we pull a fib on this level here, on this leg, all the way down from here to this point here, we got our pullback to the 382. And you can see at the 1272, that's exactly where we found our level of resistance. So these are two different fibs that line up perfectly. You can see how these fibs always are playing key roles. And then coincidentally, that 1618 right here off of this fib that we just drew lands exactly where our price target is, which is sitting at that 143 to around 153 mark. So maybe we push up there and we find like a wick somewhere in the zone, and then we chop sideways before our next leg up. Price usually needs to get some kind of rest along the way, because typically you're just not going to go straight up, not going to go vertical unless you have some crazy FOMO going on. You want the breaks in between to have a sustainable, stair-stepping way up. And as we've seen in the past, once we break our breakout point, like you can see we have a breakout point here, and you measure it out, that breakout point takes you around 50 to about 45%. and then we have our next breakout point. And when you measure that, it takes you to around 50%. And then when you take the next breakout point here, which is right at that line, if you measure that out, around 46%, so 45 to 50%. And then we take our next breakout point here. If we continue the trend and we break out 45 to 50%, or 40 to 50%, 40% takes us to 153, 50% takes us to 164. So it looks like a lot of these targets are in that same high 140s to mid 150 levels. That's kind of where all of these things are pointing. The Fibonacci, the past measures to from high point to the next high point, they have been 40 to 50%. So multiple things are, pointing to the same direction. I still think we're kind of in the same scenario where Bitcoin tends to rally during these pause phases. As you can see, we've had pretty large rallies during the pausing phase. You can see that one there. You can see this pause here that lines up with this one. What about so there? You can see it happens time and time again. As it started to increase, of course, we got our drop. We saw our 2021 peak here. So we got a major move during a pause as well. And you can see we got a major move over here as well. So during this pause, you can see it's from this point here to around there. And you can see a pretty significant move. So it has happened time and time again where during the pause we get a significant move. And now when we look at the Fed CME watch tool, I believe, so the Fed actually paused today, but when you look at the Fed CME watch tool for September, it is saying a 54% chance that we pause again. So, I mean, majority right now is saying that we get another pause. So I think the longer the draw out for the pauses, more likely it is for us to continue rallying on Bitcoin, as you can see, just based off of, historics and what we have done in the past. Of course, it doesn't have to repeat, but I'm just going off of what I've seen in the prior cycles. And I do think once we get a drop, it might be bearish initially, but eventually it'll be bullish. So it could be something like this where as it drops, you can see how Bitcoin dropped along with it. But once we found that bottom for the interest rates and then we do another pause after the major drop off, then that's where we'll get another kind of run up, in my opinion. Of course, it doesn't have to play out. That's just my observation. It also depends on how aggressive the drop off is, because if it's a slow and steady drop off, it's not going to be bearish, I would say. So if we slam rates down, then we'll get something like this, where you got that bearish move, as you can see. But that's usually during something catastrophic. And then if we get a ease into it, like we saw over here, then we could potentially be getting some kind of movement upward. We'll see, of course. You guys let me know if you think the interest rates are a key component of this, or do you think just unemployment rate and inflation is more important? Or do you think they're all tied together? I mean, I think they're all tied together, but I think it's a little combination of everything. There's so many pieces to the puzzle. And when we take a look at the dollar is actually rallying. We were talking about that after getting our break, after we're getting a breakout. So we've been incredibly bearish on the dollar, but we started to kind of open up to the idea of it going upward as we met the bottom of this channel here. As we met the bottom of this channel, all the way back from 08, you can see it's been pretty established. We did say the odds of us breaking it is going to be a little tough. And if we do break it, it's probably going to be temporary and then shoot back up. And we didn't even break it. We just started to rally off of the bottom here. We tapped the bottom of the trend line and absolutely catapulted. So that, along with this break of the downward sloping trend line, it looks like the trend is starting to change. So maybe we get some kind of inverse head and shoulders or something, and it starts to play out. We'll see. Like maybe, for instance, we get like a left shoulder here. This ends up being the head, and then we retest back down, and we create like some kind of bull flag. and then that would be a measured move of higher for the dollar. We'll see, of course. Does not have to happen, but that's kind of what I'm seeing, ahead of time. So before it actually happens, that's kind of where I'm looking to see things. But maybe we just go sideways and it ends up actually being a bear flag. So that's always a possibility as well. And with this rally on the dollar, you can see that global liquidity is starting to compress a little bit. So we won't see global liquidity continue up until this dollar starts to fall back down. But as you can see, during this entire period, as global liquidity was ramping up, the dollar was falling. So now that the dollar is starting to ramp up, global liquidity is falling. So we'd like to see this turn into a bear flag, and then we get a nice measured move further down. We'll see if that ends up happening or not. We want to see something like this, and then have a measured move to much lower prices, or maybe at least touch this key level of support, fall outside of the channel one more time, and then push up. But right now, it is starting to look a little more bullish than bearish for sure. And if this continues, then expect global liquidity to just cool off completely. Eventually, that will flow into Bitcoin, of course. That's pretty much all I have for you guys here today. Make sure you like and subscribe on the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.